It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by Anthony Cannella. We're coming to you from Sacramento, by the way. Anthony is a member of the California State Senate. And so I want to speak with you about groundwater, an issue you know extremely well. You actually were the individual that kind of informed me and taught me about this whole notion of subsidence, which is when so much groundwater is pumped, literally the land becomes quicksand. And it becomes quicksand for just yards and yards, miles and miles. Yeah. Are you still seeing that in your communities?
We are, yeah. We still are. We're in the third year of our drought. We've got surface water that's been restricted, partly because of the drought, partly because of regulations from the state of California, the federal government. And so farmers are pumping water to keep their orchards and their crops alive. And I certainly understand that, and I don't blame them for that, but it's creating a real problem where we're overdrafting our groundwater. And we do have massive subsidence in my part of the district, and that the ground is sinking. And what happens when the ground sinks, you can't fill it back up, so you lose that aquifer.
There's no recharge possibility.
No, because the land has now settled, and there's no way to put more water in there. So it's a very serious problem, and we have got to deal with it.
So let's talk about a move to try to address problems such as the one you just described through regulation. Now, we may be a state that regulates a lot, but in this area, we regulate not at all. We are the only state in the union that does not regulate groundwater. And as I understand it, there is at some level bipartisan support to create some regulatory scheme. Is that fair?
Well, I can tell you from my perspective, we have to. And really, I would like to see it driven by the locals, because really they're the ones that are suffering because of that. And a lot of counties are. Stanislaus County is, Merced County is looking at it, Fresno County is doing it. And so we've got to do more, because we've really got to come to an equilibrium when it comes to groundwater. But part of the problem, again, is we've restricted the amount of surface water. So a lot of that water is being used for environmental purposes now, which I'm not going to debate that. But when you have less water, because surface water, now they're not able to irrigate as much. So even if they do, they're using sprinklers, so there's less recharge in the groundwater, and they have to use more aquifer water in order to do their crops. So any solution, we can't just say, look, you can't use groundwater anymore. It's got to be coupled with more storage, because that's really the
and
bigger
above
solution.
Ground storage or below ground?
Well, I think both. I think above ground storage, I think below ground storage. I think we've got to convert all of our wastewater treatment plants to tertiary or secondary treatment. That water can be used for crops. So there's lots we can do. I just get concerned when the only solution is, well, let's regulate groundwater.
And let's talk more about it. You discussed the fact that you'd like to see the locals be kind of in charge of that regulation. And as I understand it today, there are bills marching forward that would give local control to groundwater regulation, except those bills as drafted indicate that if the localities do not address the matter through regulation, the state would address it.
That's right, yeah. So the way they're written, that if the locals don't do it to the satisfaction of the State Water Board, that's the key, then the State Water Board will take over and manage the groundwater, which means really it's done, because you can't have a one-size-fits-all because the regions of the state are so different. So what I think we should do is we should pass legislation. We've got to deal with this issue. It's too important, and we've got a growing ecological disaster just brewing. It will happen. But I think it should be, look, this is what's expected of the locals, and it may be a county that regulates the groundwater, it may be a district that manages, but then we can say, look, if you don't do it, we're going to withhold funding from you. We have money for groundwater management, groundwater cleanup, groundwater storage. You will not get any of that money unless you manage it.
So that's the stick.
I think that's the stick, yeah.
You don't
I think it's
want
a carrot
the
and a stick.
state to step in and be the regulatory authority.
I don't think it's worked. I think we set the overall goals and objectives, and then we provide the incentive or determine if they don't do it.
But what do your friends on the Democratic side say on this issue?
Well, I think they certainly understand my perspective, but look, again, we're in a time of crisis, and so I understand the need to act. But I just don't think the State Water Board has done a great job managing
Let's talk
these
more
things.
about that and other issues when we come back. For our viewers on HLN, thanks for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back with Senator Anthony Cannella. So, Senator, I want to talk about the storage question, because that really is one that is causing a lot of consternation amongst the stakeholders. It does seem to be that there is agreement that we need some form of above ground storage, at least additional dollars for it, but it's the number that is causing the machinations. Talk to us about what your sense is in terms of the golden number, the sweet spot.
Well, I think it's $3 billion, and I understand we're going to go into negotiations because the bond's going to get smaller, but understand in 2009 when the water bond was passed initially, which was historic, by the way. Now that I'm here and I see how hard it is, it's like it's a miracle it happened. They started at $5 billion, and they negotiated down to $3 billion. So they already negotiated, where every other part of the bond was growing, their part was shrinking. And then when you look at the projects that we want to build, Sites Reservoir, Temperance Flat, you know, if you get it down to $2 billion, you can't do them. Really? You can't build it. And look, we've got a lot of demand for the surface water. We've got the State Water Board, again, they want to regulate groundwater. Well, they're regulating surface storage, and they're saying that 40% are, they want 40% unimpeded flow in the rivers. So basically they want rivers that are flowing healthy all the time. Well, that comes out of the reservoirs. So what's going to happen is those reservoirs are going to be drawn down in the summertime at a time when the farmers need it, and it doesn't make sense. So we are moving in this state. We are more focused on the environment, and that's a good thing. And a lot of that water is going for environmental uses, but we're not building more storage. So I would argue that any new storage we get is going to be environmental water. That's for the environment. And the water, the farmers and the cities get their water back from the original storage project.
So is your sense that we can come to a resolution on this issue on storage, because it really has become the sticking point?
Well, I would argue that the storage is not the sticking point. It's really the treatment of the delta. You know, we had an agreement that it would be $3 billion. That's before the governor weighed in.
Sure.
The bigger controversy is what happens with the delta. So there's money in there for habitat restoration.
Right.
The original bond said it would go to Fish and Wildlife in order to manage that restoration project, which has great experience. The folks that represent the Delta want the money to go to the Delta Conservancy.
Okay.
And that's problematic because, you know, they're hostile to the BDCP, they're hostile to the
Which
tunnels.
is the Bay Delta Conservation Plan.
Yeah, and I understand that, and they want it to be BDCP neutral, but you know, there's restoration out there that's required, and really the conservancies, their annual budget's about $1 million. Now we're going to give them $1 billion to get into an area they're not comfortable with. So that, in my opinion, is really the sticking point, less or so the dollar amount and the storage portion.
So how does the BDCP play into this? Because as I understand it, the BDCP has no involvement with the bond.
Right.
I mean, it's a completely separate issue, but it's hard to decouple them if you think about it.
No, it is. It really has. You're correct. It has nothing to do with it. But everybody in Northern California, which includes the Bay Area, is concerned about the tunnels. That's because they're afraid that they're going to take their water, and so the BDCP and the tunnels kind of work together. And so they're afraid, I think, and we'll have to talk to Delta folks, that if the money goes to Fish and Wildlife, then the implementation and the habitat restoration will benefit the BDCP and benefit the tunnels. When really, we don't believe that's the case, and we're happy to do other legislation that says, no, it just goes for restoration. Because the other thing, again, with the Delta is, it's critical to California. 25 million people in California get their drinking water through the Delta. And the Corps of Engineers has estimated that there's a 99% probability of catastrophic failure of the Delta system within the next 50 years. That would be a disaster on such a scale that we've never seen in California.
As I understand it, if the Delta does fail through earthquake or otherwise, Southern California literally would be decimated. I mean, there would be nothing left in terms of the economy, the environment. People would have to flee.
Yeah, it would be a disaster. I don't know if it would. I don't know. It could be that bad, but
if it continues for 6 months.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, if we have a catastrophic failure of the Delta system, you can't rebuild that quickly. So it's important that we, fix the levees, and the habitat restoration is good because, I think that's important. But I also support the tunnels as well because if everything fails, we've got to get water through there.
What about your Democratic friends? You have the governor supporting the tunnels. He's a Democrat.
Yeah.
What about?
I would say this is not a Democrat-Republican issue.
Really?
It's a geographic issue. So when you have the folks that represent the Delta area.
And where are they? I mean, are they split on it, or are they against tunnels?
They're against tunnels.
They're against tunnels.
They're against tunnels. And so again, it's not Republican and Democrat, but like you've got the Central Valley representatives like myself, and we're focused on moving water through the Delta. So it's since I've been in the legislature, I'm wrapping up my 4th year. This is the most difficult subject I've had to work on, and not because it's hard, because I understand water and water flow as an engineer, but the politics is so strong that, and understandably so. But it's we've got a week and a half to get through.
His name is Anthony Cannella. He is a member of the California State Senate. I'm Brad Pomerance, California Edition.